Hate is a strong emotion. To say that you hate something is to put all other feelings to one side in favour of resentment. It's not quite the same as a person or item not quite floating your boat or not quite being what you expected. It's far more extreme.
And in some places, especially the internet, I feel like it's overused. Maybe because life has taught me to be more mellow, but I just don't see the point in it. Especially when dealing with video games. A variety of factors can play a part in why you might hate a game, and some games are of course more deserving of that privilege, but then we have some games that are despised for really insignificant reasons. Maybe a bad experience, maybe some misplaced optimism, or it could be that the game isn't very good in your eyes. Overhated is the idea that some games out there get way too much flack for really small problems, that an angry mob grows and just never stops expanding. It's not quite the same as Underrated, where a game doesn't get the recognition it deserves and is instead left to fade into obscurity. Overhated is more when a game is inundated with loathing and vitriol and doesn't really warrant it. Either way, let's hope things don't get too messy. The Mario series is sometimes accused of standing still too often. Even the king of video games isn't allowed that kind of luxury. And I'd say that a platforming franchise starring a fat Italian plumber and a small cast of supporting characters might struggle from time to time in the innovation department. Yeah, he'll have his spin-offs like anyone else, but the main series won't take too many deviations. Hell, some people complain when the spin-offs change things up. Just look at Super Paper Mario. Let's be frank here, it's a lot harder to make a good platformer than it is to make a good RPG. I'm not trying to take away any of the achievements accomplished by RPGs, and especially those with Mario in them, but there's a lot more that can go wrong with a platformer. See, yeah, the genre switch present in Super Paper Mario is not only brave, but really well executed. It might be a little jarring to some who had gotten used to these kinds of characters partaking in turn-based battles, but Super Paper Mario is honestly one of the most self-aware and groundbreaking platformers Mario's ever starred in. So what if you can't have a buddy fight alongside you? Now you can flip dimensions and literally get a new perspective on your environment. To be fair, this game isn't exactly hated on, more like shrugged off, but considering that this is one of the smartest games that Nintendo's made for quite a while, I believe that it's still got the short end of the stick.
If you consider Super Paper Mario to be a platformer, which you probably should because the RPG elements are few and far between, then this is a Mario platformer with a great story, probably the greatest story ever put in a Mario game. I reckon it's probably worth picking up just for that. When Rareware get a hold of your franchise, you can expect fireworks. Just look at how good Donkey Kong 64 was. Just imagine what they could do with some of Nintendo's other big names, like Star Fox.
Welcome to the age-old war between expectations and payouts. Following Star Fox 64, fans were expecting something huge for the next console generation. And the news that Rare would be making a Star Fox game for the GameCube meant exciting times ahead. What was produced instead was a pseudo-Zelda game featuring Fox McCloud running around Dinosaur Planet with a staff, flying pterodactyls, and talking to a Scottish rock man. Oh boy, I'm sure that won't anger anyone. But, putting the conjectures to one side, this is a surprisingly enjoyable game when you get into it. Maybe it has something to do with the company that made the damn thing. They've made some pretty good games before. It may play a lot like Zelda in places, but that would only be a concern if it did a half-assed job of it. And thankfully, it's pretty solid. Yes, the R-Wing sections are short, yes, the entire Star Fox universe didn't have to be here, but if you take it for face value, it's a lot of fun. This was actually the first Star Fox game I ever played, so my expectations were based off of, hey, you like Zelda, this game's apparently a lot like Zelda, you'll probably like it. But there's still a lot of joy to be had here. And no, this game didn't send Star Fox into a downward spiral, or move Rare onto darker pastures. Star Fox Adventures just went about its business as a satisfying adventure title. Hey, I enjoyed this game a lot more than Star Fox Command. When you're talking about nearly killing off the franchise, I have no idea how we got Star Fox Zero out of the ashes of Star Fox Command's endings. It's like fanfiction put into overdrive. Tell me if you've heard this before. A beloved franchise set for a brand new game, a sequel in fact, kind of, to be made by Rare, except this time it's one of their own IPs. If anyone knows how to make a good Banjo and Kazooie game, I'm sure Rare can finally deliver on their promise of Banjo 3. But then you boot up the game, see your heroes are now fat and lazy, and watch your dreams crumble before your very eyes.
You can't really get away with drastically changing the gameplay of a main series title without an awful lot of backlash, let alone if the game in question is one that people have been looking forward to for a really long time. So the initial reaction to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was entirely justified.
I'm not saying I agree with it because I didn't grow up with the 2 gems on the N64, but I completely understand the rise of hope brought about by the premise of Rare making a new Banjo-Kazooie game only for it to be let down spectacularly by Nuts and Bolts. A game that doesn't just depart from the usual Banjo-Kazooie gameplay, it's unrecognisable. A serious polar opposite to where its reputation was crafted. But strangely enough, this kind of works in its favour, because there's very few moments where you're reminded that this is a Banjo-Kazooie game. You can put on the blinkers and slowly forget that this reasonably impressive game belongs to one of the founding fathers of 3D adventure games. I mean, if you're looking for a game where you can build your own vehicles out of Lego and watch as your monstrosity struggles to complete some of these challenges, you won't find many problems with it. There's definitely some interesting novelty value to it that you should try out. Just never look at the box art. It might make you cry. There's not a lot in the world of Metal Gear that is downright hated by people. There might be the occasional section of a game or a setup that might get annoying, like going through everything without triggering an alert, because fuck that shit, but the levels of polish present in each successive entry into the series usually results in a smooth gaming experience. As a result, there isn't really a dip in quality in any of the main series games. Even Metal Gear Solid 2, which people got up in arms about, is one of the highest rated games of all time. I mean, just look at these scores. Not too much about, hey, they replaced Snake with a prissy girl. I'll give it a 7. This was back when game reviewers had integrity. But more recently, there's been a game released in the series that didn't receive the same levels of praise. The near perfection of previous games had apparently been replaced by the most acidic of words: mediocrity.
When MGS5 Ground Zeroes came out, the main focus of a lot of reviews wasn't about how different the gameplay was, how open world would affect Metal Gear, or even how this sets up the Phantom Pain quite nicely. Instead, it was on the game's length and how much you'd have to pay to play this short game.
Because into the picture rides Konami, throwing their business models around like they know what they're doing. Seriously, I have some major doubts that the decision to chop off the start of the Phantom Pain and release it as a standalone game had much to do with Hideo Kojima and more to do with Konami wanting to make a quick buck. And I can understand that people got mad about this, paying a lot of money for one mission of gameplay that might last you 2 hours if you spent most of your time getting shot doesn't feel like a good deal. But here's the tipping point for me. Ground Zeroes in terms of gameplay is just a snapshot of the Phantom Pain, which incidentally is one of the best games I've played in the last decade. If I sold you a tiny piece of delicious cake for a lot of money, you'd probably hate me for not really giving you your money's worth, but the cake would still be tasty regardless. To have your view of a game skewed so badly by trivial matters like length and price is fucking moronic. It might make some sense if the game in question wasn't all that good, but Ground Zeroes is pretty incredible. Don't like reflex mode? You can turn it off. Don't like the price? Do what I did and get it off Steam summer sale for the price of lunch that day. The feedback this game got often feels like an excuse to vent about the follies of modern gaming and how companies frequently try and exploit the consumer. And while no one should be paying full price for a fraction of a game, don't let it cloud your judgment towards the game behind it all. It might not be worth all that money, but it's definitely worth your time.
I never like to have ties on this channel. I always try and narrow it down to one specific thing that best represents the point I'm trying to make in each countdown. But I tried. I mean, I really tried. But there is no single game that is given unnecessary hate above all others in the Call of Duty series.
And I think that sums up the situation perfectly. Since 2007 and the release of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the Call of Duty franchise has marched on like an unstoppable juggernaut. The switch from combat set in World War II to being based in modern times marked a change in how the games were dealt with, and they've barely looked back since. But with a rise this dramatic, you naturally get people who think that the games don't deserve it, that the games can't possibly be good enough to warrant being one of the best-selling franchises of all time. With every new title added to this library with very little changes made, people who hate the series gain more and more ammunition. There isn't a single game that is hated above all others that don't deserve it. Instead, the disapproval is focused on the whole damn thing. The concept of releasing a game every year and an online community that feels more and more open to screaming 12-year-olds. The situation isn't brilliant. But here's the thing, these games do kind of deserve the accolades and millions of sold copies. Granted, the latter has more to do with the games being more accessible than your average video game, and so it gains popularity from, say it quietly, casual gamers, but it only helps it grow further. And while its yearly release schedule can easily be something to despise, especially since other big name franchises have tried and failed to copy it, hi Assassin's Creed, I almost didn't see you there. But since that Call of Duty now has 3 different developers working in rotation on the games, so each game has at least 3 years worth of development put into them, they certainly aren't rushed out if that's the concern. In terms of innovation, another issue that is often brought up, the series has certainly had its stagnant points, in the same way that most franchises have stood still at one point or another, but the most recent Call of Duty game, Advanced Warfare, showed that the series was willing to move forward in pursuit of faster and smoother gameplay. And the multiplayer, where, yes, you'll still find a lot of young kids eating microphones, but the multiplayer itself is going from strength to strength, which is slightly different to the single player campaign, which has been pretty blockbuster for a while now. It's had its lapses, but it's also had its share of sensational set pieces. The problem is that people refuse to give Call of Duty a chance to convince them otherwise. They see the success from a relatively simple product and a toxic community and write all the games off as horrendously overrated copy and paste representatives for all that's gone wrong with modern gaming. Some people don't see it as a collection of games with their own highs and lows. Instead, it's simply Call of Duty. If you have to hate these games, I implore you to try them first. Not only will you be able to concentrate your hatred on one particular game, but you never know, it might just win you over.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and there doesn't seem to be a middle ground with Call of Duty. You either support the series and love the franchise that shows everything bad about gaming in the 21st century, or you hate it with every fibre of your being and treat every game, both new and old, with the same levels of disdain. Whichever way you want to go, I recommend you find it out for yourself. If you want to take one thing away from this situation, and probably the whole video, don't follow the crowd.
Want to have a say on what I talk about next week? Leave a top 5 suggestion in the comment section below and go follow me on Twitter, where later in the week I'll be compiling the best submissions and setting up a vote over there. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everybody, hope you liked that. This video was supposed to be last week's video, but I kind of had internet problems and I was halfway through last week and I didn't have much of it done and I didn't want to rush it because that'd be a bad idea. You don't rush, it's like my baby, you do not rush babies. Very, very bad idea. But hopefully everything's okay, I did it this week, no problem, so, you know, hope for the best. By the way, and this is kind of off topic, but it will be useful later. So far in 2015, what has been the best and the worst game you've played? I need this research for a video I would like to do by the end of the year, or something. Anyway, if you need me, or you want to stalk me, or you just want to be generally creepy, then go to my Twitter and Facebook and let your fingers do strange things. That sounds bloody fantastic.